Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's a pleasure to see you all here. Plenty of new faces, which is wonderful to see. I'm Paco. I help run the debates here, and there's a bunch of other admins scattered around who don't get to do as much talking, but deserve just as much credit. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Take a moment to add me as a friend. It makes this experience much easier in the future. The way these events work is that we have speakers. Those speakers tonight are myself arguing that humans are not inherently bad by nature, and then Ascari and Arrith arguing that humans are by nature bad. All right then, I'll move us on to our first speaker for the evening, Arrith. Whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Tonight's question is if humans are, by their nature, bad, and is something I imagine will be debated for just as long in the future as it has been up until the present day. The exact meaning of bad is something that's rather difficult to explain or quantify in such a short span of time, but in this case, I believe it could best be summarized as someone is bad when they act against what others feel is good. A definition that you'll notice doesn't quite help much to clarify the issue, and honestly, it shouldn't really clarify the issue that much, because it's supposed to give you an idea of why it's so difficult to quantify these concepts. I believe that humans are bad because they tend to act in such a way naturally that they come into conflict with the good of others, but at the same time, I don't believe that they are a irredeemable bad. They are still able to act upon the perceived good. The reason I say that they are, at their core, bad is that there are a number of very well-known religious sayings that form the core of morality that has been practiced for a long period of time. However, many of them have the exact same passage in some variant as each other. Do not to others what you know is hurt yourself. Seek for mankind that of which you are desirous for yourself, that you may be a believer. The sage has no interest of his own, but takes the interests of the people as his own. And of course, probably the most recognizable in Western culture, do unto others as you want them to do unto you. You can find these not just in religious or philosophical texts, the well-known Golden Rule, but you will also find them in legal texts, much like Hammurabi's Code, or even variants of them in such things as the Hippocratic Oath, first do no wrong. So, why do I bring this up? There's a very simple reason. If people were inclined to good and cooperative behaviors at their core, they wouldn't have to have the same lesson, the same teaching, repeated time and again throughout the centuries and millennia, and reinforced in such a way that they understand that it is to be followed. Instead, they act in such a way that the lesson does have to be taught repeatedly, so that they will follow it instead of defying it. Now, it could be argued that, say, the social contract is something that causes us to act in the greater good. However, this is something formed of air, thoughts, dreams, and words. It doesn't do anything to the core nature of humankind, that we are inclined to violent, emotional, instinctive reactions that perhaps don't align with what is considered a good for everyone. The summary announcement that was used to introduce this debate brought up Xin Wan and his Xinzu writing, or his Xinzu book, which was an ancient Chinese philosophical text that stated that we are our ethics, much like water, takes the path of least resistance. When we are hungry, we seek a way to eat. When we are tired, we find a place to sleep. And when we are emotional, we seek a way to express it. We follow these emotions because that is how our instincts dictate that we should. However, just because our instincts dictate that we should does not mean that we cannot rise above them. Xinguang did say that we have these instincts. However, he also said that should we be able to direct these instincts, we are still capable of good, even though it is not natural and instinctual to ourselves. Just because we are not good at our core, because we are born in such a way that we are bad, does not mean that we are unable to rise above it and to become greater than we were originally born to be.
Thank you very much, Arrith. Are there any questions? That was a very good speech, well grounded in a load of... No questions for Arrith. I have one for you then. Let's see if this kicks up any more questions. You mentioned the theory of the social contract. Can I suggest that, in fact, the social contract theories, as put forward by thinkers such as Locke and Hobbes in the 17th century, the contract itself has nothing to do with human nature. The part of those theories which has something to do with human nature is what they term the state of nature, i.e., and that is what the contract must be built around, how they perceive humans to be. So Locke argues that humans in their state of nature are good and kind and willing, and Hobbes puts forward a contrasting view that they are kind and evil and cruel. So you say that institutions corral humans into a certain way of being. No, in fact, the thinkers on the social contract are saying that institutions must be built around human nature. So do you really think, in light of that reading of political science, that institutions need to be built to reflect human nature, or that we shape institutions around the way that human nature is?
I do think that institutions have to be built in such a way that they corral and they channel this human nature in such a way that it can become good and constructive. The state of nature is, after all, defined in such a way that how humans act when there's an absence of what was loosely defined by Hobbes and Locke as civilization, speaking from a Western sense. But this lack of civilization simply meant a lack of the social and political norms that they were used to in their day-to-day lives, in their societies. The way I personally perceive it is that if they were to lack these sort of social constructs that had already channeled people into such a way of living, people would not perhaps be naturally inclined to drift towards constructing them already. You require the sort of thinkers, the sort of speakers who are willing to put these ideas forward, who are willing to try to get people to cooperate and to work towards the idea of building this civilization before you start getting the sort of impetus, the momentum that begins to get people further and further towards this idea of a civilized or a more for the greater good beneficial society.
All right. Thank you very much.